Hey guys, Zach here, and today I want to share with you guys my 5 tips for breeding shrimp. Before we get into it, if you would consider subscribing, it does help out the channel, and with that out of the way, let's get into it. Tip number 1 is going to seem kind of like an obvious tip, but it is to make sure that you have male and female shrimp. Now, I wanted to make this a tip for really 2 reasons. For you guys out there that already have shrimp and might not have had shrimp breeding, or you're not sure if you have females and males in your tank, I wanted to go over just a little bit of the indicators to show whether it's male or female. I'll pop up a picture on screen, but the females have a small little triangle on their back that's called a saddle, and the males do not have this. And that's really the only way you can identify whether it is a male or a female shrimp, aside from if the shrimp is buried, which just means that they're carrying eggs under their tail. That's the way to tell if you have male and female shrimp. Now, the second reason I wanted to make this a tip is for when you do go to the fish store and get shrimp, you need to make sure that you're getting a large enough amount of shrimp that you have that chance at that variation of male and females. If you do go to the store and you decide to get like 3 or 4 or 5, even 6 shrimp, your odds really are not that good at getting males and females. And you're probably not going to get that many females and that many males if you only get 6 shrimp, right? The best case scenario is you've got like 4 females and 2 males and you can have a bunch of babies. But I would recommend going somewhere like 10 to 12, 15 even, starting shrimp, because you will probably have some shrimp that do pass away when you get home or a couple days later or whatever it might be. You're probably going to have some shrimp die off, and you want to make sure that your starting population is high enough that you can start having lots and lots of shrimp babies, shrimplets, as soon as possible. Tip number 2 is one that I have found has helped me the most in getting large batches of shrimplets each time, and that is going to be having separate shrimp breeding tanks. Now, this is super important for a couple different reasons. The first reason is that having separate tanks for your shrimp allows you to monitor them much closer than if they were just in a big ecosystem tank where they can hide in all of the cover and really just get away from you, go into every nook and cranny, and just pretty much evade your eyesight, so you can't check up on how your shrimp are doing and seeing if the females are getting buried or not, and just being able to make those little micro adjustments to get to the point of having shrimp breed. Now, the second reason why I like to have separate shrimp breeding tanks is because of the fish. Almost every fish is going to predate on shrimplets. They're just small enough and tasty enough that if a fish can get to them, they're going to eat them. It's just an undeniable fact of nature, and this can lead to you just having smaller batches, and it can also create very bland colored shrimp. If you breed shrimp in a bigger tank, sometimes what can end up happening is you're going to have a batch of, let's say, 20 shrimplets, and you're going to have a couple of brown shrimp in there if you've bred from like reds, and only the brown ones are going to survive because they're the ones that are most well blended into the background. They look like a piece of wood or some of the substrate or whatever it might be, and the fish are only going to eat the more colorful shrimp, and you're going to be left over with only brown shrimp or even natural color shrimp. So if you want natural color shrimp, do that. However, if you do want to keep those bright, colorful shrimp, then I would definitely recommend having a separate breeding tank. Tip number 3 is going to be to keep plants with your shrimp in their breeding tanks. Now, I'm not saying you have to go full out aquascape with hardscape and plants and particular kinds of plants and epiphytes and all that with your shrimp. No, I'm saying you should keep a type of plant with your shrimp. I generally like to just do moss with my shrimp, because I've found it provides protection for them, and they feel a bit more relaxed, and they don't have to focus so much so on survival as they can just focus more so on breeding. That little bit of cover helps the babies also feel safer, so I don't have that high of a mortality rate, and I get lots and lots of babies all up in the moss, and it's super awesome. The moss also provides increased surface area. Any plant is going to do this, but I particularly like moss for the increased surface area. All those little nooks and crannies on it that if you keep moss, it catches either microfauna, microflora, whatever it might be. Even algae can start to grow on it, and the shrimp just absolutely love this for grazing. If you think about a normal aquarium, if it's just empty, you've got 4 sides, right? Bottom and then the 4 walls, and that's it. And if you're growing any sort of algae or anything, it's only got those walls for them to graze on. But if you increase with algae, now you've got all this other surface area actually in the water column, and they can graze through that, and you'll have that surplus of food just in case for your shrimp. Speaking of excess food, tip number 4 is going to be make sure that your shrimp are always fed in excess. Making sure your shrimp are fed in excess does a couple of things for the shrimp, and it's super important. The first is that if the shrimp doesn't have to focus on finding food, then it can focus on other pieces of its little shrimpy life, that mainly being breeding and reproducing, because if there's excess food, they know that their population can grow and they'll go into a breeding mode instead of survival mode. And that is how you're going to be able to grow your shrimp populations quite quickly, making sure that there is excess food. The other reason excess food is really good is that if they're not eating it all, what it's going to do is give rise to other microfauna or microflora inside of the tank. So think about like scuds or daphnia, something along those lines can come from having excess food in the tank, which I don't mind. If you don't like that kind of thing, then just scoop out any excess food at the end of the day that they haven't touched, and you should be pretty much fine. But the excess food also gives those excess nutrients and can either feed your plants that should be in the tank, or it'll feed algae, which then increases the amount of excess food that you can have in the tank, because now you've got algae growing, which the shrimp are going to munch on, as well as the food that you're feeding them, which means that you have an abundance of food in your tank, and the shrimp really don't have to worry about eating too much. They know that there's always going to be food, so they can focus much more so on reproducing, and you should be able to get a lot more babies out of this. Tip number 5 is make sure that your tank is stable and suitable for shrimp. There are a couple things that I mean by this. First is just make sure that your tank is cycled. Don't get a brand new tank and put water in it and then go and get shrimp the same day. That's going to just cause you problems down the line, and it can get really out of hand, and your balance of your tank can just be completely thrown out of whack. I find that making sure that you have either pre-cycled media or a pre-cycled substrate in with your shrimp does help greatly, and making sure that your water is very stable before adding in the shrimp helps a lot with breeding. Another way to ensure that your tank is suitable for shrimp is just making sure you have enough calcium. The shrimp absorb the calcium through the water once it becomes calcium ions, and it's super important that they have enough calcium to make sure their shells grow strong, and also so that when they do shed, that they're not dying in their own shed if it is too soft and they don't have enough calcium. The way to do this, there's actually a couple ways. The first, which is the way that I like to do, is just making sure you have some form of like limestone or something with lime in your water. So think about any like Sirius stone, slate stone. I've even got like limestone bedding that I use in my shrimp tanks, and I have found that this keeps them perfectly healthy and it keeps their shells looking great. Another way that you can dose for calcium is either by, I'm pretty sure, crushing coral or even eggshells, putting small amounts into your tank. This just ups the calcium. It does require a little more maintenance because you are dosing each time you want to add calcium. However, this is another great way to get calcium into the water. They also do absorb calcium from what they eat, so it's important to make sure that the food that you are feeding them is rich in calcium. You don't want to feed them something that isn't going to give them the nutrients that they need. A little bonus tip for you guys right at the end of the video is if you're keeping multiple colors of shrimp, so you've got your reds, your greens, your blues, your yellows, whatever color shrimp that you do get, try and keep them separate if you are trying to keep that color. So if you've got, let's say, greens and reds, and you want greens and reds, then keep your greens and reds separate, or else they're going to mix together, and you can either get shrimp that are spotty and have green and red spots or stripes or a little mixture of it. But most of the time what can end up happening is you can go back to that natural coloration, so either kind of a clear or even like a brown color can end up happening if you do mix the colors of shrimp. So just be aware of that if you do intend to keep a bunch of different colors of shrimp. So that is everything for this video. Hopefully you guys did learn something. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you have enjoyed, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.